even in our mess ups, this is good for everyone to hear. God can still work and does still work. It's good to know that I didn't or couldn't mess up someone's eternity, I guess.
Hey friends, it's Abdu, and we're back for another installment of Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda. It's a podcast where we have a guest speaker and me talk about times when we coulda, shoulda, or woulda done an apologetics endeavor or engagement or an evangelism experience a little differently. So with me today for Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda is Alex McElroy, my good friend Alex McElroy. He's an apologist, international speaker. By the way, he's spoken at things like TEDx, for example. I haven't done that. I'm super jealous. He's a leadership advisor. He's the author of Blueprint for Bible Basics, but he's also the president and founder of Proof for the Truth Ministries. He's gotten his Master's of Apologetics from Liberty University, and he hosts a wonderful podcast that I had the privilege of being a guest on, I believe, twice, yes. Maybe at least twice that I recall. And it's called The Relentless Pursuit of Purpose. So make sure you check out Alex McElroy, Proof for the Truth, Relentless Pursuit of Purpose, all over the internet, and you'll get some great content from Alex. But the content I want to focus on today with Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda is the Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda kind of content. So Alex, welcome to Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda. It's great to have you on, brother. Good to see your face, hear your voice, and let's hear a Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda story where you coulda, shoulda, woulda done it differently.
Yes. Thank you for having me, first of all. It's great to be here.
Yeah, pleasure.
I was actually thinking about this over the last week and started to make a few notes. I'm like, man, I messed up a lot.
Yeah. Join the distinguished club of people who have done that. Yes.
But one comes to mind. There was a student actually with an organization both you and I know. I was serving with them at the University of Florida on a missions trip. And after one of the lunch sessions, I was talking with this young man, we'll call him Jim, and we talked for 2 hours. And I was just knocking down the objections, or what I thought the objections were. And he was saying, why did God have to come down? And how do we know God's real and the moral standard and all these different things? And I'm just going through the arguments and like, okay, I got the answer for that. He comes back to the evening talk at like 7 o'clock. And then him and I talk another 3 hours after that. So now it's 5 hours for me. He's been to 2 other hours and still not convinced, right?
Yeah.
It has a great ending, but what I learned is I led too much with the head and not the heart. And I say that because I after digging and after asking more questions, I learned 4 hours in that his real struggle was not the kind of intellectual boundaries to come into Christianity. It was, he was struggling with homosexuality and he felt he wouldn't be accepted. So, yeah, he kept saying all these other objections as kind of a smokescreen, but I had to do the digging and I didn't do it well the first part of that encounter. So taught me a lesson. Thankfully, like I said, it does have a good ending because I was, even when I went back home, I was texting him and keeping up with him. And I think some of the people from the university ministry were keeping up with him. And about a year later, we were texting back and forth, and he said he accepted Jesus. I was like,
oh, my goodness.
Yeah. I was like, what? Like, it blew my mind. So even in our mess ups, this is good for everyone to hear, God can still work and does still work. It's good to know that I didn't or couldn't mess up someone's eternity, I guess. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, that story reminds me a couple of things, Alex, it reminds me of. First is my own journey. You've heard the story, and some folks watching this or listening to this know as well. It took me 9 years, of pursuing purpose, of relentlessly pursuing it. The reality was truth was relentlessly pursuing me, even though I was stubborn with it. And there was guys who came to my apartment when it first started, and they spent hours and hours and hours with me. And they would never have known that what they were saying was making a difference, because I wasn't totally aware of the fact that my intellectual questions were actually smokescreens for they weren't insincere. They were sincere, but I stuck to them for so long, even after having gotten the answers, because there was consequences to changing your worldview, and there's things you struggle with, and you don't always tell the person you're being evangelized by those kinds of things. So your story really helps to encourage people, I think, that you might be thinking this is 5 hours of wasted time, and the reality is it's not. So, brother, I want to say just also thank you for spending that level of committed time. I don't think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but that you're like, I'm going to stay as long as it takes, so it's a war of attrition. I'm going to outlast this guy, and he'll give up essentially and give his life to Jesus because he got too tired of listening to me. That's not the motivation. No. It's obviously sticking with him. So let me ask you a question, a follow-up question.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to just share a quick one of my own, very similar to that in the sense of I could have said something better a little faster. What do you think in the course of that? Were there hints during the course of the conversation where you thought, I think there's more to this, but you just didn't get into it? Or were you so sort of fixated on the intellectual that you didn't hear what you could have heard? What do you think was going on there?
Possibly. I'd have to go back in the conversation, but I do think at that initial 2-hour part, he did say something, if I remember correctly, because I was trying to explain like how you can ground love. And so I said, hey, is there and this is kind of how it started to come up. He didn't fully open up at that time, but I said, for example, is there a young lady that you love or you're attracted to or whatever? And he said, well, what if we say it's a young guy? And he kind of just said it and kept moving. And I was like, okay. And so I did kind of pick up on at that point, but then he asked other questions and I kept going. But then later that evening, looking back, I was like, wait, this wasn't it. There was more to this. And he kind of tried to open up. I guess that was his way. I think I missed some of those cues earlier on in the conversation.
Yeah. You know, that reminds me of a time when I was having a conversation with a guy. He's a Muslim guy. And a friend of mine and I had gone to his house to chat with him. And my friend had known him before I did. And I went to his house. And when we got there, I should have picked up on some things. You know, I didn't pick up on them right away. And you can't just jump on those things because maybe you're wrong about the hints you're looking at. But you can pick up on certain things. I get there. And he's not there yet, and so me and my buddy are there, and his wife and his sister answer the door, and they say, "Come on in, he'll be home soon." They go into another room because they can't be with us in the room, and of course, true to form, they have, as Middle Easterners do, they have a pile of snacks and goodies for us to enjoy while we wait. Well, he didn't take more than a couple of minutes before he got there, but he was working as a dealer at a casino nearby, which gambling is haram; it's forbidden in Islam, but he was working like that. That should have told me a couple of things. We sat down, started talking about the resurrection. I launched into this dissertation about the historical evidence for it. And he's politely listening to me, but after a while, he just couldn't take it anymore. He says, nah, you know what? I don't even want to hear any of that stuff. Here's the thing I want to know is, because he got all political on me. And he said, how is it that you think that this God actually loves us when he lets so many bad things happen to Arabs in the Middle East, through the Israel conflict, through other conflicts as well? He was a skeptic. He was an agnostic. He wasn't even all that interested in Islam and Christianity. He just wanted to know, where is a God who is loving in this universe given all that tragedy? We could have saved so much more time. We got to the answers at some point, right. But man, I just didn't pick up on the cues and say, or ask a question. Hey, you know my background. What is there anything about that you find interesting? I could have let him lead. Instead, I took the reins and said, I'm going to lead this conversation. Yeah. So that happened to me too. So I could have, should have, or would have done it by asking him, not assuming what his hangups were, but actually asking him, hey, what issues do you have? So I appreciate the way that you are asking him questions. The reality is, friends, Alex's story tells us that care and concern doesn't mean you're going to have an efficient conversation, but you can have a committed conversation. And Alex, I also want to say you kept following up, man, with texts and stuff, and that's so important. Yeah. Because
I think I felt like the job wasn't done, and I also felt like I messed up. So I wanted to continue to have that relationship to the best of my ability. Yeah, we live and learn.
Yeah, we do. Well, that's the key. What you just said is the key. Is that sometimes we get so paralyzed with messing up or spending 5 hours spinning our wheels that we never actually get engaged. Or we mess up once and we say, I'm never doing that again. And the beauty of what you're saying is that we live and we learn. You're a seasoned apologist. You're someone who does this all the time, digitally and in person and all these things. I do the same thing, and so many of our guests have done it. And they've lived and they've learned, but they've stayed in not only in the conversations, generally speaking, but in the specific conversation. So, man, great story. I think one that we could all learn from. I'm just so grateful that you hung in there. I'm so grateful that God met that young man right where he needed to meet him. Thankfully, you were there as part of that journey. So thanks for sharing that, brother. Really appreciate the story.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, friends. Well, this has been Coulda, Shoulda, Woulda. My guest has been Alex McElroy with Proof of the Truth Ministries. Check out his podcast, The Relentless Pursuit of Purpose. He's got a YouTube show and all that stuff. Check him out, and you won't be sorry. You'll get some great content from him. Thanks again, Alex.
All right. Thank you.